She thought she would wed a disabled millionaire, but what unfolded at the wedding left her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The wedding hall glittered with chandeliers and polished marble floors, yet the atmosphere felt heavy, almost suffocating. Guests whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward the young bride standing at the altar. She wore a white gown that shimmered under the lights, but her trembling hands betrayed the truth. This was not a wedding born of love, but of necessity. Her name was Emily Carter, a woman who had grown up working 2 jobs just to help her sick mother pay for endless hospital bills. The debt collectors had already circled her family like vultures, and the pressure to save her mother's life left Emily with no way out. When the offer came to marry a wealthy man in exchange for financial security, it felt less like a choice and more like a trap. The groom, Alexander Reed, was a millionaire known to the public as a man who had lost the use of his legs after a tragic accident. Tonight, he sat motionless in his wheelchair, his face calm, unreadable, as if he were carved from stone. The crowd's eyes slid from Emily's trembling figure to Alexander's still posture, their expressions dripping with judgment. "She is marrying him for money," someone whispered in the second row. "Look at her pity mixed with greed." Oh, Emily lowered her gaze, clutching the bouquet so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She told herself she was doing this for her mother, for survival, not for herself. But each word of gossip, each cruel stare, burned into her chest like fire. The ceremony began. The officiant's voice echoed in the hall, but Emily barely heard it. Her focus was locked on the simple silver ring that lay in the velvet box. When Alexander lifted it, his hand steady and deliberate, her breath caught. There was no warmth in his eyes, no trace of affection, only a sharp, cold glimmer as though he knew exactly what everyone was saying, and perhaps agreed with them. The ring slid onto her finger, cold against her skin, heavy like chains. Applause erupted around them, but it sounded hollow, mocking. In that moment, Emily realized her life had shifted forever. She was no longer free. She belonged to a man she barely knew, tied by a contract that felt more like a sentence. And yet, beneath the surface of his stillness, something in Alexander's gaze lingered. It was not pity, not disdain, but something unreadable, something that would soon unravel her entire understanding of who he really was. The celebration after the vows ended quickly. Guests raised their glasses, but the laughter was hollow, forced, like actors reading from a script. Emily stood beside Alexander, her new husband, yet the distance between them felt like an ocean. He offered her his arm as cameras flashed, and though he smiled faintly for appearances, his eyes never softened. When the doors to the grand hall finally closed, silence wrapped around them. The servants guided them to a mansion so vast, Emily felt lost in its marble corridors. The air inside smelled of polished wood and roses carefully arranged in crystal vases, yet no amount of beauty could soften the chill that followed her every step. That first evening, Alexander spoke little. He rolled his wheelchair into the study, leaving her alone in the master suite. Emily sat at the edge of the enormous bed, staring at the wedding band on her finger. It shimmered faintly under the light, but to her, it felt like an iron shackle. She whispered to herself, "You chose this for Mother. You must endure it." The next mornings became routine. She would prepare tea and leave it outside his study door, untouched more often than not. At meals, they sat opposite each other at a table so long that it felt like 2 strangers dining in different worlds. He asked no questions about her life, and she dared not ask about his. Their marriage existed only on paper, witnessed by rings and legal contracts. Yet, in the quiet, Emily began to notice details. His wheelchair was always neatly placed, but sometimes she heard footsteps in the hall late at night, steady, strong footsteps, that did not match the image of a disabled man. Once, when she carried laundry past his study, she glimpsed him leaning over a laptop, his expression sharp, his fingers moving with speed across the keyboard. He snapped the screen shut the moment he sensed her presence. His eyes met hers, And for the first time, she saw a flicker of something different, guarded, calculating, almost as if he was hiding more than she could imagine. Outside the mansion, life continued to test her. When she visited her mother at the hospital, she endured whispers from nurses who recognized her. The girl who married the millionaire in a wheelchair, they said. Some pitied her, others sneered, convinced she had sold herself. Emily held her head high, but the words pierced her heart. One afternoon, as she carried groceries back through the estate gates, she saw a group of children from the nearby neighborhood. Their kite had tangled in the high iron fence. Without hesitation, Emily climbed a small step and reached up to free it. The children cheered, thanking her with wide smiles. She laughed softly, brushing dust from her dress. From a window above, Alexander watched. His usual coldness shifted slightly as he observed her kindness, the natural way she treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status. For a moment, his mask slipped, and something unreadable passed through his eyes. That night, Emily placed the usual cup of tea outside his study. This time, when she returned in the morning, the cup was empty. It was a small detail, but it stirred something fragile in her chest. The mansion was still filled with silence, still heavy with unspoken truths. But beneath the cold surface, an unseen thread was beginning to weave between them. Emily did not know it yet, but the life she believed was nothing more than a loveless contract was about to unravel into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. The weeks after the wedding unfolded like a carefully rehearsed play. Emily played the role of dutiful wife, quiet and respectful, while Alexander remained distant, always hidden behind the door of his study or away on unexplained trips. The mansion echoed with silence, yet beneath that silence, small cracks were beginning to form. One rainy evening, Emily wandered into the library, seeking comfort in books. Rows of leather-bound volumes lined the shelves, their spines glistening under the dim light. As she reached for a novel, a folder tucked carelessly between the books fell to the ground. Papers spilled out charts, contracts, financial reports, stamped with the Reed Corporation seal. Her breath caught. She knew that name. Reed Corporation was not merely successful, it was an empire. The documents revealed strategies, mergers, and bold decisions that could only come from someone at the very top. She quickly gathered the papers, her heart racing, and slid them back into place just as Alexander's voice echoed behind her. Looking for something? His tone was calm, but his eyes were sharp, studying her every movement. Emily turned, forcing a polite smile. Just a book to pass the time. Oh. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary before rolling forward in his chair. Yet as he passed her, she noticed his hand pushing the wheel with a strength too steady, too precise, not the motion of a man broken by injury. That night, she could not sleep. Questions swirled in her mind. Who exactly had she married? A disabled millionaire shrouded in pity, or a strategist hiding in plain sight? The following days offered more hints. Emily often found trays left untouched outside his study. But when she checked inside, Alexander was nowhere to be found. Once, returning from the hospital late at night, she caught sight of a tall figure at the far end of the garden, standing effortlessly under the moonlight. The figure moved with confidence, shoulders broad, back straight, before vanishing into the shadows. Emily's heart pounded. It had to be him. But why hide? Why continue the charade? Still, there were moments that softened the edges of her fear. One morning, she discovered a bouquet of fresh lilies placed on the dining table. Her mother loved lilies, and Emily had once mentioned it in passing. She stared at the flowers, her hands trembling, wondering if Alexander had listened to her after all. Later that week, another test of her resilience arrived. A charity gala was announced, hosted by the Reed family. Alexander insisted she attend with him, and though the thought of facing the public filled her with dread, Emily agreed. She chose a modest gown, while Alexander appeared in his wheelchair, expression unreadable. The ballroom glittered with wealth. Eyes turned as they entered, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some praised her beauty, others mocked her supposed desperation. Emily held her head high, her dignity, her only shield. When a guest sneered openly, suggesting she had traded her freedom for comfort, Emily spoke clearly, her voice steady. I chose responsibility over selfishness. If you cannot respect that, then your judgment means nothing. The room fell silent. Alexander's gaze flickered toward her, something unreadable glinting in his eyes. For the first time, his lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. That evening, back at the mansion, Emily placed her nightly cup of tea outside his study. Hours later, when she checked again, not only was the cup empty, but a note rested beneath it. In bold handwriting it read, "Thank you for today." Her chest tightened. It was the smallest of gestures, yet it carried more weight than all the riches surrounding her. Emily realized she was no longer trapped in silence. Something was shifting between them, something fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. Days after the gala, Emily noticed subtle changes in her daily life. The servants who once looked at her with disdain began to greet her politely. Neighbors who once whispered started offering faint nods of acknowledgement. Yet with every small sign of acceptance came new shadows. One morning, she opened the newspaper and nearly dropped her cup of tea. A column headline read, "Gold Digger or Savior? The Woman Who Married Alexander Reed." Her photograph was splashed across the page, paired with cruel speculation about her motives. The article painted her as a manipulator who had trapped a vulnerable man for his fortune. Emily's cheeks burned as she read each word. Her heart twisted with anger, not for herself, but for her mother, who might see this slander. She crumpled the paper, but when she turned, she found Alexander at the doorway, watching her silently. "Do you believe them?" she asked, her voice trembling with defiance. His gaze was steady, unblinking. "Does it matter what I believe, or what the world believes?" "It matters to me," she whispered. For a moment his mask slipped. There was a softness, almost regret, before he wheeled away without another word. Later that week, the storm intensified. At the hospital, Emily overheard two women mocking her. "She is pretending to be noble, but she is just clinging to his money," one sneered. Emily clenched her fists, but walked on, refusing to let their words see her break. That evening, an unexpected challenge arrived. Alexander's estranged cousin, Richard, came to dinner. Richard was sharp-tongued, ambitious, and clearly resentful. Throughout the meal, he directed thinly veiled insults at Emily, suggesting she had no class, no education, and no right to sit at the Reed table. Emily swallowed her anger, choosing silence at first. But when Richard laughed openly and called her the purchased bride, she lifted her chin and spoke firmly. "Respect is not bought. It is earned. And unlike you, I do not measure worth by wealth alone." The dining room fell silent. Richard's smirk faltered, and for the first time, Alexander spoke sharply. "Enough." His voice was low, but carried a weight that silenced everyone at the table. Emily glanced at him, startled. For a man who often cloaked himself in indifference, this defense was startling. After Richard left, Alexander remained quiet, but his eyes lingered on her longer than before. The days that followed revealed even more. Emily noticed that his study door was no longer always closed. Once, she entered to deliver tea and found a sketchbook lying open on the desk. Inside were detailed plans for expansions, projects, and designs that revealed a brilliant mind at work. Her hand hovered over the page, her chest tightening with realization. The man she thought was only a hidden millionaire was far more powerful than she could have imagined. That night, when she returned to her room, she whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Alexander Reed?" Outside her door, unseen in the shadows, Alexander stood listening. His hand clenched tightly on the armrest of his wheelchair. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of truth pressing against the walls he had built around himself. The facade of their loveless contract was cracking, and soon, the world would witness the truth neither of them could hide any longer. The days after the gala were filled with uneasy quiet. Emily replayed every detail of that night in her mind, the way Alexander had defended her with a subtle look, the way his eyes had softened when she spoke against the cruel whispers. Yet the silence in the mansion remained, leaving her to question whether any of it had been real or simply another act in their strange marriage. One evening, as she carried fresh laundry past the study, she heard voices inside. She paused, the sound sharp against the stillness. Alexander's voice was firm, commanding, but not directed at her. He was speaking on the phone. "Yes, move the assets into the subsidiary. The board cannot know yet. Delay the press release until I give the signal." Emily froze. His tone was not the tone of a man weakened by circumstance. It was the tone of power, of control, of someone who pulled the strings behind a vast empire. She leaned closer, her breath shallow, when suddenly the door opened. Alexander was there, his sharp eyes locking on hers. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then he said evenly, "Curiosity is dangerous, Mrs. Reed." She lowered her gaze, clutching the laundry basket. "I did not mean to intrude. I was only passing by." He studied her for a long moment before rolling back into the study and closing the door with deliberate calm. But the image burned into Emily's mind. This was not a man confined to pity. This was a man who carried secrets far larger than she had ever imagined. The following morning brought another revelation. Emily rose early, stepping into the garden to find a sketchbook lying forgotten on the bench. Curiosity overcame her caution. She opened it and discovered pages filled with detailed notes, plans for corporate expansions, charity foundations, and even security protocols. Each line was written in Alexander's precise handwriting. One page caught her breath. At the corner, he had written her name. Just one word, Emily underlined twice. She traced the ink with trembling fingers, her heart racing. Was she part of his plans? Or was she simply a pawn in something larger? Later that week, she visited her mother at the hospital, only to find her surrounded by reporters. Flashes exploded, questions firing relentlessly. "Is it true your daughter married Alexander Reed for his fortune? How does it feel to live off his wealth while others struggle?" Emily rushed forward, shielding her mother from the onslaught. Her heart pounded with shame and fury. She knew Alexander's world was powerful, but she had not expected its shadows to reach her family. When she returned to the mansion, her anger boiled over. She confronted Alexander in the study, her voice shaking but strong. "Did you know about this? Did you let them harass my mother?" He looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. The world will always find something to criticize. Wealth attracts envy. "That is not an excuse," she fired back. "You could silence them with one word, yet you stay hidden, letting everyone believe lies about us, about me." For the first time, his calm exterior cracked. His voice hardened. "You think silence is weakness? You think appearances are truth? You know nothing of the games being played around you." Her chest tightened. "Then teach me, or at least be honest with me." The silence that followed was unbearable. He finally turned away, staring out the tall windows into the night. His voice dropped lower, almost reluctant. "There are things you are not ready to know." Emily stood frozen, torn between fear and determination. She had entered this marriage believing it was only a transaction, a way to save her mother. But now she realized she was standing in the middle of a storm far larger than herself. And the man she had married was not at all who he seemed. The storm that Emily had sensed finally broke. It began with whispers in the newspapers and on television, rumors of corruption, scandals tied to Reed Corporation, and questions about Alexander's health and leadership. At first, Emily tried to ignore them, convincing herself that such stories were only part of the cruel world of the wealthy. But soon, the whispers grew into a roar. One afternoon, when she stepped outside the mansion gates to meet the delivery boy, she found cameras waiting. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, flashing lights blinding her vision. "Mrs. Reed, is your husband truly disabled, or is he hiding something? Did you marry him for money or for power? Is it true the marriage is only a contract?" Emily's heart raced as she pushed through the crowd. Their voices cut deep, every question sharpening the wound of doubt she already carried. She wanted to scream that she had married to save her mother, not for greed, but the words would only feed the fire. That night, she confronted Alexander again. His study was dim, only the glow of his laptop illuminating his sharp features. "This is not just about me anymore," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "They are coming for both of us. If you truly care about this marriage, even as a facade, you need to stand beside me." For the first time, Alexander's eyes softened, though his voice remained steady. "And if I told you that standing beside me means stepping into a war you cannot escape?" Emily swallowed hard, fear prickling her spine. "Then so be it. I am already trapped in this marriage. I would rather fight than cower in silence." The following day, the storm reached its peak. A shareholders' meeting was held at the Grand Hotel downtown, and Alexander insisted that Emily come with him. He arrived in his wheelchair, dressed in a tailored suit, his expression cool, untouchable. Emily walked beside him, her chin raised, her dignity her only shield. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Reporters filled the corners, cameras rolling as investors hurled accusations. "The company is failing under your leadership," one man shouted. "You are unfit to run Reed Corporation." Emily felt the heat of their judgment, but before she could react, Alexander's hand moved subtly. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair, his posture straightening in a way she had never seen before. For a fraction of a second, it looked as though he might rise. But instead, he remained seated, his jaw tightening as he addressed the crowd with unwavering authority. His words were sharp, precise, cutting through the accusations like steel. He spoke of strategies, mergers, and numbers with the confidence of a man in absolute control. Emily watched in awe. Every sentence revealed a truth she had suspected but never confirmed. He was no weak figurehead. He was the mind driving the empire. Yet the crowd was relentless. Voices rose, demanding proof, demanding answers. The tension in the room built until it felt unbearable. Emily, heart-pounding, took a step forward. Her voice rang out, steady but emotional. "My husband has endured endless judgment, but what I have seen is not weakness. It is strength, resilience, and brilliance. You can call me naive, you can accuse me of greed, but you cannot deny what stands before you. He is more than what you believe." The room fell silent. Alexander turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, the mask he always wore cracked, and a flicker of something vulnerable passed through his gaze. Later that night, back at the mansion, Alexander broke the silence. "Why did you defend me?" Emily's chest tightened. "Because I could not stand to see them tear you apart. Not when I know you are more than the man they think you are." For a moment, his composure faltered. He leaned back, his voice lower than she had ever heard. "You are braver than you realize, Emily." She did not know it then, but that day had changed everything. The lines between a contract and something real had begun to blur. And soon, the truth Alexander had guarded so fiercely would break free, whether he was ready or not. The pressure surrounding Reed Corporation reached a breaking point. Rumors of fraud, betrayal, and secret deals flooded the media. Every headline screamed about Alexander Reed, the crippled millionaire, whose empire was crumbling. Emily felt the weight of the world pressing down on their marriage, and for the first time, she feared the secret he carried would not remain hidden much longer. The climax came at a high-profile charity event hosted in the city. The ballrooms sparkled with chandeliers, but the atmosphere was heavy with suspicion. Emily walked beside Alexander as cameras followed their every step. The whispers were louder this time, the ridicule sharper. "She looks like a prisoner. Is he truly as weak as he pretends? She must be counting her fortune already." Emily held her head high, but each word cut deep. She glanced at Alexander, who sat calm in his wheelchair, his face unreadable. Yet she saw the tightness in his jaw, the storm brewing beneath the surface. The evening moved forward with speeches and staged smiles, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Then it happened. A rival executive, drunk on wine and arrogance, stepped forward during the gathering. His voice carried across the hall. "Alexander Reed," he sneered. "Tell us, how do you plan to lead when you cannot even stand? How can you protect your empire when you hide behind your chair and your wife?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in, hungry for scandal. Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to shield Alexander, but before she could speak, he moved. Slowly, deliberately, Alexander placed his hands on the arms of the wheelchair. His muscles tensed. The room fell silent as he pushed upward. Gasps filled the hall when he rose to his full height, tall and imposing. Every trace of weakness erased in an instant. Emily's breath caught. She had suspected, but to witness him standing with undeniable strength was overwhelming. The rival executive stumbled back, his face pale. This is impossible." "Oh," Alexander's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "You see weakness where there is none. You mock what you cannot understand. But make no mistake, I built Reed Corporation with these hands, and I will protect it with everything I have." The crowd erupted in shock. Some whispered in disbelief. Others applauded. The cameras flashed wildly, capturing every angle of the revelation. For the first time, the world saw not a broken man, but a leader who had hidden his power in plain sight. Emily stood frozen, her heart torn between awe and anger. He had deceived her, let her endure humiliation and pity while he hid the truth. And yet, seeing him command the room with such authority stirred something undeniable inside her. When they returned to the mansion that night, silence wrapped around them. Emily finally broke it, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. All this time, you could walk. You let me believe. You let the world believe that you were helpless. Do you know what they said about me? Do you know how they looked at me? Alexander met her eyes, his expression raw, stripped of the mask he always wore. I know, and I hated every moment of it. But I needed to know if you would stay when the world turned against me. If you would care for me, not the power or the wealth. Emily's chest ached. So I was nothing but a test to you? His voice cracked, the calm facade slipping. No, it began as a test, but it became something I never expected. You became something I cannot lose. Tears burned her eyes, but she turned away, unable to face him. The contract marriage that had started as survival had spiraled into a dangerous entanglement of truth and lies. And now, with the secret revealed to the world, Emily had to decide whether to trust the man who had deceived her or walk away forever. The night after Alexander revealed his secret was one of the longest of Emily's life. The mansion's halls felt colder, each marble floor echoing with the silence between them. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between anger and the undeniable image of him standing tall before the crowd. Morning came with no relief. At breakfast, the air was heavy, their silence louder than any argument. Finally, Emily set down her fork, her voice sharp but trembling. You used me, Alexander. You let me become the object of ridicule, the woman who married a broken man, while you watched from the shadows. Do you know how cruel that was? Alexander's gaze remained steady, though there was pain in his eyes. I know. And I regret it more than I can say. But you must understand, I have enemies waiting to destroy me. If I had revealed myself too soon, everything I built would have been torn apart. I needed someone who could stand by me when I appeared weak, someone who would not abandon me for power. Emily shook her head, tears brimming. That is not love, Alexander. That is manipulation. You did not give me a choice. You trapped me in this marriage and hid the truth. His voice broke through the stillness, rough and unguarded. And yet you stayed. Even when the world laughed at you, you defended me. Tell me, Emily, if it had been only about money, would you have endured all of that humiliation? Her chest tightened. She hated how his words cut through her defenses. It was true she had endured, not just for her mother, but because somewhere deep inside, she had begun to care for the man behind the mask. But that truth only deepened her pain. Later that day, news outlets exploded with headlines of Alexander's revelation. The world debated endlessly. Some hailed him as a genius who outsmarted his rivals. Others condemned him as a liar who deceived everyone, including his own wife. Emily could not escape the spotlight. Paparazzi followed her to the hospital, flashing cameras in her face as she tried to visit her mother. Strangers on the street whispered, pointing fingers at her as though she were part of the grand deception. Back at the mansion, Emily confronted him again. Do you see what your lies have done? My mother's peace is gone. My dignity is gone. And I do not even know if I can believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. Alexander rose from his chair, no longer hiding his strength. His voice was raw, filled with a desperation she had never heard before. Then believe my actions. Every night I saw the way you left tea at my door. Every time you stood against the gossip, every moment you chose kindness instead of bitterness. That is what made me fall in love with you. Emily's heart pounded, but her anger flared again. You speak of love, but love does not lie. Love does not use someone as a pawn in a game of power. He stepped closer, his expression tormented. You are right. I was a coward. I let fear drive me. But if you walk away now, if you leave, I will have lost the only thing that ever mattered beyond wealth and power. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned away, unable to face him, her voice breaking. I do not know if I can forgive you, Alexander. I do not know if I can live with a man who made me question everything I believed. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she whispered, I need time. That evening, Emily packed a small bag and returned to her mother's side at the hospital. She needed distance, space to breathe. Away from the walls of the mansion that now felt like a cage of lies, Alexander stood at the window of his study, watching the car drive away. For the first time in years, the man who had built an empire with unshakable confidence felt powerless. The woman he loved was slipping through his fingers, and this time, no wealth, no strategy, no deception could bring her back. The contract marriage that had begun as a transaction had turned into a battlefield of love, trust, and betrayal. And now, with Emily gone, Alexander was left to face the truth. If he wanted her to return, he would have to fight not with lies, but with honesty and a heart laid bare. Emily's days away from the mansion felt both liberating and heavy. At her mother's bedside, she found peace in the simple moments feeding her soup, arranging flowers by the window, listening to her soft breathing as she drifted to sleep. Yet beneath the calm, Emily's heart was restless. Memories of Alexander would not leave her. The way he stood tall at the gala. The note he once left her. The flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. She hated him for the deception, but she could not erase the truth that somewhere along the way, her heart had betrayed her own intentions. Meanwhile, the world outside spiraled into chaos. News anchors debated Alexander Reed's revelation every night. Rivals attacked Reed Corporation, demanding his resignation. Protesters gathered outside the headquarters, waving signs that read liar, fraud, cheat. The empire he had built was under siege. Days turned into weeks. Emily expected Alexander to come for her, to send someone, to plead, but he did not. Instead, she received silence. It was a silence that both infuriated and confused her. Was he letting her go? Or was this his way of respecting the time she had asked for? The answer came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as Emily pushed her mother's wheelchair through the hospital garden, a familiar voice broke through the chatter of nurses and patients. Emily. She froze. Alexander stood a few feet away, not in a wheelchair, not hiding anymore, but standing tall in a simple suit. Cameras were nowhere in sight. This was not a performance. This was a man stripped of pretense. Her mother looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. So this is the husband I have heard so much about. Oh, Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to turn away, to shield her heart. But Alexander stepped closer, his voice low, filled with sincerity. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I could not stay silent any longer. I had to see you. She steadied her voice, though her hands trembled. Why now, Alexander? Why come here when everything is falling apart? Because it is not the company I am afraid of losing, he said softly. It is you. I let fear control me once, and it cost me your trust. I will not make the same mistake again. If you never return to me, I will accept it. But I need you to know my love for you is real. It has nothing to do with contracts or appearances. It is the only truth I have left. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds were deep. Before she could answer, a group of reporters stormed the garden, cameras flashing. They shouted cruel questions at Emily's mother, trying to exploit her condition. Emily stepped in front of her mother, shielding her. Her heart hammered with fury. But before she could say a word, Alexander moved. He stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. Enough! His command silenced the chaos. If you want answers, you come to me. Leave my wife and her mother out of this. She is not a pawn in your game. She is the woman I love, the woman who stood by me when no one else did. If you want the truth, here it is. I deceived the world, but she did not. She is guilty of nothing but kindness and courage. If anyone deserves respect, it is Emily Reed. The garden fell silent. Cameras captured every word, broadcasting them to the world. For the first time, Alexander's love and respect for Emily were no longer hidden, they were declared openly, without hesitation. Emily's heart pounded as she looked at him. This was the man she had wanted all along, not the cold strategist, not the secretive millionaire, but the man who was willing to bare his soul and stand by her side. That evening, the story dominated every headline. Alexander Reed defends his wife publicly, declares marriage, built on love, not deception. Critics who once mocked Emily now praised her dignity. Investors who doubted Alexander saw a leader who would fight for what mattered most. The tide began to turn. Back at the mansion, Emily sat across from Alexander in the grand dining hall. The silence between them was different now, softer, fragile, but filled with possibility. She finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You humiliated me, Alexander. You made me doubt everything. But tonight, when you spoke, I saw the man I had hoped you were, and I realized something I have been fighting my heart because I was afraid of being hurt again." His eyes glistened as he leaned forward. "Emily, I cannot erase the past, but I can promise you this: no more lies, no more secrets. From this moment on, I will stand before you as I truly am, not as the world wants me to be." Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, "Then show me. Prove to me that this is not just another performance." He rose from his chair, not hiding his strength, and walked toward her. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. His voice was steady, but full of emotion. "I love you, Emily Carter Reed. Not as a contract, not as a test, but as my wife, my equal, my partner. Will you give me another chance?" Her breath caught. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of her heartbeat. Finally, she nodded, a shaky smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, but this time, no more chains, no more lies, only love." Relief flooded his face as he pulled her into his arms. For the first time, the embrace was real. Not an act, not a contract, just love. Weeks later, a new photograph replaced the cold, distant wedding portrait on the wall. In it, Emily and Alexander stood side by side, smiling genuinely. No masks, no secrets. The world still whispered. But it no longer mattered. They had faced lies, judgment, and betrayal. And in the end, love had not only survived, it had triumphed.